Everybody, and thank you for joining this webinar, Business Recovery, Building Back Better. The second in the series, of which I'm sure you'll agree is very timely, as we're starting to emerge from lockdown and into what's widely being dubbed a new normal. I'm John Quinton Barber, founder of Social, a communications agency based in Manchester, and I'll be facilitating today's webinar, which has been hosted by the Growth Company and Greater Manchester Local Enterprise Partnership. With an update and to explain better and to answer our questions is Andy Burnham, Mayor of Greater Manchester, Luke Hordwell, Co-Chair of Greater Manchester Local Enterprise Partnership, and Mark Hughes, Chief Executive of the Growth Company. Over the next hour, we're going to be exploring some of the key themes that are emerging as we slowly head into this new norm, and how Build Back Better can be a catalyst for meaningful and real change, and how you can get involved. As ever, if you'd like to join in and submit a question, please do so, and I'll try to ask as many as I can. And if we're pushed for time, please be reassured that your question will be captured and will form part of an FAQ, which will be uploaded online in the coming days. Before we begin, and I always say this, I just want to add a personal note that I too am a business owner with 40 colleagues to look after. And I know how tough it's been these last few months, and I know there's some major challenges ahead and opportunities. So I've got a huge amount of empathy for everyone who's tuned in today. So without further ado, I'm going to turn to you first, Lou. Can you please remind us about what Build Back Better is all about and some of the themes and conversations that's been emerging over the last 3 or 4 weeks?
Thanks, John. So I mean, some of you will have joined us on the last webinar where we talked a little bit more about this, but for those of you that didn't, or for those of you that have probably been busy with lots of other stuff, just a quick reminder on what we're talking about in putting Build Back Better at the heart of our recovery strategy and our thinking. So for us, this is really about championing a movement around a different kind of version of ourselves as we come through this, and recognizing, I guess, really that we've probably got in amongst all the pain and anxiety and problems we're dealing with, we've also got an opportunity and a really rare moment to stop and think and step off the treadmill and really redesign our society and our economy in a way that isn't necessarily going back to the way things were, but is going forward to something better. And for us, business plays a really important part of that, both in terms of the economic recovery, but also how we shape society and how we treat and look after individuals in that society moving forward. But at the same time, we see this as something that spans everything from skills through to green agenda, through to digitization, through to transport. So it really is a kind of cross-cutting vision of the opportunity that lies ahead for us if we get some of this right. And we all know it's within our own businesses as well as, let alone the whole city region, sometimes quite difficult to hold on to something that's a more positive vision and outcome that could come out of these incredibly difficult times. But I think we're still passionate that there is opportunity in all of this chaos, and want to rightly deal with the issues that are right under our nose. We've got to keep pushing our recovery towards something that hopefully when we get there feels like we've moved forward to something that was better than life before, albeit with some pain along the way. So in our last session and in some of our comms since, we've been asking people on that website to get in touch and really to just kind of reach out if they share that vision, want to be involved, and also to share their thoughts on what better looks like. So, we're firmly of the view that, this needs to be from the people and the businesses of Greater Manchester, not a top-down vision from a dozen or so people who happen to be in some of these conversations. So we've had an absolutely amazing response, and actually we've been busy replying to people, trying to collate some of these to get some common things. But just to give people a feel for some of the things that are coming through in some of that feedback, there's been a lot of conversation around skills and making sure we adapt to the future. Some really interesting thoughts actually on procurement and how we can begin to rethink both public and private procurement to stimulate growth within our own businesses. A lot of thoughts around how we ensure that we get the strategy right, but also we think about the pace and the immediacy of change and how we behave in a very agile way, because the kind of economic cliff is imminent, and we know that we need to move fast. A lot of conversations from business owners around them recognizing an opportunity to be really flexible in the way that they work with their employees, to think about working day, to think about how that fits into the return to place and the return to places of work. Lots of conversation about purpose, and people saying that actually, you know, they want to survive as a business, but they also want to play a different part in society and help those around them to move towards recovery and a better life. And some really interesting points actually about talent, that we mustn't just talk about talent as the pipeline coming out of universities, but we must think about the whole of the GM population as our talent base, and how we can bring them through in a more inclusive way to some of the opportunities and some of the new business areas that we know are going to be the thriving sectors. So and yeah, inevitably a strong focus on green and also work-life balance. So, you know, we know from some of those surveys that actually people are enjoying some elements of being at home, and that they're seeing their family more. They feel like they're getting a bit more exercise, or they're eating a bit more healthily. And so I think people are recognizing that, again, they might not just want to go back to the way things were. But I think just one thing to reiterate is, certainly in a lot of our conversation, and this is coming through, we know that our attention is quickly turning to young people and the need around young people, which, you know, if anybody saw the ONS data, you know, we know there's been a 60% surge in unemployment benefit claims in the last month amongst 18 to 24-year-olds. If you look at it year on year, we're up 82% across the country. So you know, and the Resolution Foundation report tells us actually it's the under 25s who are most likely to lose their job in the pandemic. So I think for us, that's front of mind as we start to kind of move through the Build Back Better conversation, is to make sure that young people get the time and the attention and the focus that they deserve in that. So yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Lou. I think it's really heartening that it was about just over 3 weeks ago we had the last webinar, the first webinar about Build Back Better, and so much progress has already been made in 3 weeks, and so many questions and so much interest. That's fantastic. I think what people who are engaged on this will want to find out is how and when things will be put into place to implement that as well. So that's something. But Andy, just turning to you, Andy, I think obviously build back better, but build back safely, I think, is one of the key elements as well that people are concerned about, and also about just bringing confidence back to the city. So if you've got any thoughts on that.
Well, thanks so much, John. Good afternoon, everybody. Great to join you again. And I'll probably start by echoing John by saying, you know, we fully understand how tough things are, and it's in some ways hard to think about building back better when what you see ahead is obviously so challenging. But just a word on why this is important. There is a real risk, isn't there, that the 2020s could be like the 1980s in the Northwest if we're not careful. So you kind of have to be positive, don't you? You kind of have to think, well, come on, you know, we can rally around a new vision for where we're going. And I just think on a very simple level, that's why Build Back Better matters. It's recognizing that the journey ahead of us all is tough, but as long as we're kind of trying to get to a better place, it might help us all kind of stick with the journey and eventually get there. So it is an initiative, I think, that's not sort of a pipe dream or just sort of wishful thinking. It's a really important exercise in positive collective action to carry the city region through the challenging time that we're in. The world is going to change coming out of this, is what I would say, John. I mean, there's just no doubt about that. The question is, how is it going to change, for the worse or for the better? And it's obviously our job, all of us, to see if we can make it the latter. So I'd agree with everything that Lou's just said. I think it was a fantastic introduction. But to take it on a little bit, if I could just describe some of the things that I think, some of the things are going to happen anyway, and it's how we make the best of them. But then there are other things that I think are what I would say opportunities that come to Build Back Better. So let me just start in that way. John, you mentioned about safety, and you're absolutely right about that, about how do we kind of help people have a safe return to work. And this brings me to something that's going to happen anyway. We are going to have to reshape the city and the city region in terms of the physical infrastructure, the layout of roads, public transport and how it functions. We are very much wanting to give a clearer message about face masks on public transport and accelerate that culture change around safe use of public transport. So I think that's coming anyway. The question is, can we turn some of the temporary measures that we do into permanent measures, which build a kind of sense of a safe city region in terms of how we manage cycling and pedestrians and keep them safe by more segregated space? So can the temporary change become a permanent change? Another example of this would be the opportunity to reshape the working day and people's working lives in Greater Manchester. Soon I'll be coming out to all of you and saying we need to consider a clear plan for the return to the office. So it can't be everybody back at once. It's going to have to be, let's say, 25% at the most of people in the first instance. And even those people can't all come in and travel at 9 o'clock in the morning like they may used to have done. It's going to have to be a staggered start time to the working day so that we spread the commute over the limited public transport capacity that we've got, and then a staggered end time. But you could see that as a sort of a negative, but actually it's an opportunity, isn't it, to give people better working lives, more flexible working lives, more home working. Let everybody enjoy more balance in their working life. Let's get rid of the very traditional 9 to 5 working day in Greater Manchester and make it something that works better for our residents. So that's a kind of an example of how it's going to have to change anyway. So let's make it work better for people. I think we can have a look at accelerating the reform of public transport and cleaning up the air. That's something, again, we're going to have to do anyway, but I think now we've got a chance to bring it forward, and that's something I'm talking to the government about. But then, John, if I could sort of take it from some of the things that are going to change anyway and make the best of them, but more to a sort of an agenda about where we've got clear opportunities in front of us as a city region to build back better. So let me just take people through 3 or 4 of what I see as those things. The first is an opportunity to change the way our health and care system works. I think everybody who's been living through this can see how social care isn't in any way up to the modern purpose that we require of it. It's a broken system. We've got an opportunity here because we are the only English city region with a measure of health devolution. We have a chance to put forward a new vision for a fully integrated health and care system where the standards of the NHS are applied to social care and we lift the whole thing as one. We've innovated in this crisis. That's a good message for us to get out. Greater Manchester's tradition of innovation down the centuries has been very much present in this moment where we've brought forward our plans for an integrated single care record for our 2.8 million citizens. So they now have an integrated health and social care record. Nowhere else in the country has it, a massive development. We've also brought in new digital systems across social care. The point I'm getting to is there is an opportunity there for us. And the leaders, the 10 leaders and myself, we agreed yesterday to put ourselves forward to the government as a pilot for the reform of health and social care coming out of this, showing how if you operate them as one system with NHS standards applying on the social care side, you can make a system work much better for people, and particularly for those who work within it. So that's a build back better opportunity, and we are progressing it now. We are moving it forward, and we are soon to make an offer to the government to make us a pilot. Second example would be, it's an opportunity to solve the housing crisis. As we've heard the mantra stay at home, I think we've all recognized that home means different things to different people. And of course, some people don't have a home. If there's a moment to solve the housing crisis, surely it's now. Surely we should start rethinking the high street. There won't be retail centres anymore. You know, they were in decline anyway, and the current crisis is probably going to accelerate that, sadly. So let's rethink our towns now as residential centres, high quality residential centres, where affordable homes are linked to public transport. Let's use this moment to solve the housing crisis, because that itself will be an economic stimulus. If we're building more homes, building them in our town centres, you know, this is an opportunity, isn't it, to bring forward that kind of change, and of course an opportunity to create a lasting legacy on homelessness, as we've been trying to do. Another example is it's a chance, working with Lou, Mo and the LEP, it's a chance to accelerate new industries. So we have our ambitions for new industries in green technology, green construction, digital, health innovation, as I've just been saying. Bring it forward, speed it up, I'm talking to colleagues in the GMCA and the growth company about more conversion courses for people. So how can we help people who are in industries that are struggling reskill through conversion courses into green construction or digital or whatever it might be? It's an opportunity to kind of bring forward the future when it comes to the industries that Greater Manchester will draw its prosperity from going forward. We are going to focus a lot on young people, as Lou said. We want a young person's guarantee, but I think it's also about an all-age guarantee to help people maybe make a change in their life, because this crisis may have forced them to do that. I've asked Lou and the LEP to consider more support for people to become self-employed, create a more entrepreneurial culture. Perhaps people have been having those thoughts while they've been at home. Let's look at all this empty office space we've got around the city region. Can we provide some startup space to people who are wanting to set out in business? Let's see it as an opportunity to create new businesses, I suppose is the point that I'm making. And John, I'll finish on this last point, because there's another opportunity, but I think it isn't necessarily in our hands. It's more in the hands of the government. This is an opportunity really to put rocket boosters on levelling up. The health crisis has hit deprived parts of the country hardest. And if all things are just left as they are, the economic crisis will come and deliver a double whammy. So we have a government committed to levelling up. Whatever it does, it now should put that agenda absolutely on, with a vengeance. It needs to start levelling up and really empowering city regions like ours to do all of the things that I'm talking about. Many of the things I've described, integrating health and care, trying to deal with the housing crisis, accelerate new industries, we'll try and do anyway, whatever happens. But if the government fully comes in with us as a partner on the levelling up agenda as part of this, then I think Build Back Better could have real meaning. So I'll finish by saying, John, it's not sort of pie in the sky. I think change is coming, whether we like it or not. The challenge for all of us in all of our different roles is to kind of pull together behind one vision if we can, and try and make that change for the better rather than change for the worse. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Andy. And I didn't count how many times you used the word opportunity there, but it's fantastic to hear that, because I think we've all been through the mire of the last however many weeks, 8, 9, 10 weeks, and it's always been about challenge, and it still is about challenge, but opportunity. To hear you say that and talk about opportunity is, I think is perhaps in some ways ahead of many other regions in the UK in what we're doing. So it's fantastic. Mark, just on that theme of when it all started, the growth company has been there from day one with initiatives, support, and I think from your viewpoint, it's just be good to understand, for everybody to understand where you feel the challenges are right now that are facing businesses, and then put that into context of Build Back Better. What can we do, and what's available, and certainly about the growth company as well, and what your thinking is and where you're heading and what kind of support, and to use Andy's phrase, the opportunities.
Yeah, okay. Well, it's great to follow Lou and Andy, but also a bit of a challenge as well. So I think for owners and managers of businesses kind of right here, right now, we do have to recognize that they still have a challenge, and sales and cash are still their challenges. But I think linking to what Lou and Andy mentioned, if they approach those challenges in a way that they think they can go back to their old business model, they can't, and they need to. I think as one of the people who are listening to this has mentioned, every crisis is a great opportunity, and therefore to look at this crisis as an opportunity. And we have seen so much innovation in businesses, in public-private organizations, to really capture that opportunity for innovation, to look at their business model, look at the products and services they produce, look at how they organize work, building on what Lou and Andy have said. What a great access to different talent businesses could have if they change the way they organize their work and their working day, as long as they can do that. So again, I just see, in a sense, those opportunities as the answer to the challenge that the businesses have right now. However, I think it's fair also to call out, some of the practicalities that the businesses are really facing at the moment. We still, although the economy is reopening, we have to remember that we still have reasonable swathes of the economy that can't yet reopen and are not going to reopen on the 15th. Hospitality, leisure, tourism, events, hairdressers, nail bars, you name it, all of those are not going to open. And they also now have to face the introduction of contribution to furlough costs in August. How are they going to make those contributions when they've got no income coming in? Bit of a challenge, I dare say. Moving slightly forward, for those who are going to open, and we're seeing more and a lot more will open on the 15th, going back to the safe agenda, how will they open in a COVID secure way? There's huge amount of guidance out there, whether on the government's website, whether through trade associations, but clearly we have to make those business environments COVID secure. Every business should be doing its risk assessment around that. Again, plenty of advice available, and we have a template risk assessment available on our website, and you need to engage your staff in the development of those risk assessments. And ideally, you need to publish them on your websites so that people can see what you're doing, employees can see what you're doing, and more importantly, customers and clients can see what you're doing. So I think it's really important that businesses do embrace that. I think just to touch two other aspects that businesses are dealing with at the moment, the implications of test, track and isolate, when that really gets going, we'll probably see, not insignificant numbers of people dropping out of the workforce because they have to isolate. Now, clearly, many of those people will be able to work from home, as they have been doing, but we will see an impact of that, a proper impact, but we will see an impact of that on the workforce. And as I mentioned earlier about the furlough changes, that is a big implication for businesses over the next 3-4 months. And then when furlough eventually unwinds, which it must do, what will come in form of additional support, and how in particular those sectors, again, go back to hospitality, leisure, tourism, will deal with that at a time when they're relatively more quiet come the autumn and winter. So, don't want to take away from the enthusiasm and opportunity side of this, because it is the answer. But here right now, today, tomorrow, next week, businesses have got to address those challenges, but a way to address them and to cut through them, which is the real key, is to look at the opportunities that particularly Andy and Lou have called out.
Brilliant, Mark. And I'm going to keep you on, Mark, so don't unmute, because I'm going to come to you in a second about Black, Asian, minority and ethnic community individuals and actual opportunities and what we're doing to improve that. Some questions are coming in fast now, which is great. And to everyone who's viewing, please do get your questions in. I'll try and ask as many as I can in the time that's allocated. And to remind you, if I can't ask, if the questions are asked, it will be collated under an FAQ. But I just want to probably start off the Q&A with there's a couple coming about Black, Asian, minority and ethnic minority communities being disproportionately affected during COVID, and what actions will you be taking to improve these opportunities for the Black, Asian, minority and ethnic communities? So, Mark, anything that the growth company is doing now or can be doing, and then Andy, I'll come to you to talk widely about that, please.
Yeah, I think obviously Andy will pick up the broader dimensions and the health point of it. I think I'll focus on the business support that we're giving to Black and ethnic minority communities, and clearly it's one of our target audiences, if I use that phrase for the moment, to drive up entrepreneurialism and successful businesses. I have to say I'm quite pleased with what we do in that client base, although wouldn't sit on our laurels in that respect. So, just to rattle off some figures, if across the UK, about 5% of businesses are managed and run by Black and ethnic minority leaders. I know that our business support programs, about 13% of our participants on those general business support programs are from BAME minorities. I also know that 20% of our lending is to Black and ethnic minority-led businesses. And I also know that almost 30% of our participants on our startup programs, Andy talked about entrepreneurialism as a way out, 30% of our participants on our startup programs are from Black and ethnic minority communities as well. So again, I would not in any way offer that as we've done it, but I do say that in a sense that we are a light to the need and the agenda, but actually the opportunity and the contribution that Black and minority ethnic people make to the economic growth of Greater Manchester.
Fantastic, fantastic. Andy, would you mind just touching on that, please, as well? And
yeah, thanks, John, and thanks for the question. Such a hugely important and question. Firstly, just to say, I think what this crisis has really exposed quite starkly, actually, and painfully, is the depth of the divides and the inequality in our society. I just think that's quite plain. Not just between communities, obviously between sectors, health and social care. You can just see lots of things laid bare in this situation, and sadly that's true of, as I said, of communities. So we had the report from Public Health England this week, which showed how the virus has affected different groups disproportionately, and it's the Bangladeshi community that's particularly affected. Now, they didn't offer all the reasons why, but it's clearly linked to quality of housing, overcrowded housing, poor housing, and then the nature of work as well, often maybe insecure work. I just think, it's inescapable when you look at what the country's been through, that this is what this brings out. And then you add on top of this, obviously, the agony, actually, that particularly the Black community has been going through since the scenes came out of Minneapolis last week. I just think there's a kind of coming together of issues here that I think is kind of bringing, people are saying no more. There is too much unfairness, too much inequality, too much discrimination still. And I think this is the moment that we're living through. And as I say, it's painful, isn't it? Because it's shocking to see obviously what happened with the callous murder of George Floyd on the streets of Minneapolis. So I was thinking over the last few days, John, about how does Greater Manchester respond to this in a city region that has a long and proud history of challenging discrimination head on. So I was thinking, and obviously we live in a world these days where it's easy, everyone puts the Twitter things up, the symbols that everyone starts to share, and the slogans and the hashtags and the lighting up buildings, all of which is important, by the way, because it's solidarity being expressed. So there's not absolutely, but it's at risk of looking it's only that. So what I was saying to our leaders yesterday was, the proper way to respond to this moment is to reflect on ourselves and consider what more we need to do to challenge ourselves. And I think if we're honest, if we look at, let's say, business, political and public life in Greater Manchester, the Black community is massively, arguably shockingly underrepresented in decision-making roles in public and private sectors. And I think this is the same reason why the virus is affecting some of those communities hardest. It's structural inequality between different communities. And it's why we made some early commitments yesterday to start a new dialogue with the Black community. We were asking for the help of Operation Black Vote to start a leadership program with us for members of the Black community to make their way and to be supported in making their way into senior positions in public and private sectors, but also to challenge ourselves around policing. And more broadly, we've committed to setting up a race equality panel in the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, and we would hope that all walks of life in Greater Manchester, including businesses, will work with us to understand some of these inequalities. It's kind of a moment where we all, I think, the deepest of reflection is required here, and not just the superficial flash of anger, or it's deeper than that, and that's something we committed to yesterday, and I'm determined to make sure it's not a glib commitment. This is a piece of work we need to embark upon with the utmost seriousness.
Thanks, Andy. And it's really good to hear that. And this is the once in a lifetime opportunity to do a lot of things, isn't it? And certainly in this area, that is really, really important. Lou, I'm going to come to you about bridling in a minute. You've got a question about bridling. I think I walk down the Bridgewater Canal quite a lot, and I've noticed there's been a huge increase in cyclists, some with a certain degree of skill and some without a certain degree of skill. I'm not a cyclist myself, but one of the things, some of the questions that are coming in, as you can imagine, is about what Andy touched on before about getting to work and safely and public transport. So there's a question come in, and it's basically about the role of walking and cycling in making healthy places where people want to live and work. How can the LEP support this more vocally and visibly? It would be great to see some leadership on this transformational topic from the LEP. So I imagine this is on quite a lot of people's minds about cycling and walking. So
brilliant, thanks, John. So yeah, I mean, inevitably, in a lot of our conversations about recovery, transport features very heavily because often it becomes the first in the sequence, in the sense that if you want to get people back to their workplaces, as well as them feeling safe, they have to physically be able to get there. A lot of the conversations we're having, I think, are around the role of place, and inevitably, I imagine we'll carry on doing a bit more digitally, in that people have realised they can work from home, but some of that's not always possible, because it's not always possible by the nature of people's work and what they do. But it's also not always conducive to the way that we work, in that, particularly I work in the creative industries. We're just about managing to do what we need to do on digital means, but still you need to get people in a room at some point and make some stuff and do some things. So I think the nature of place and workplaces is probably going to evolve, and we're going to champion that evolution quite heavily. First of all, that's about money and investment, and part of what we'll do is work with Andy and the GMCA team to lobby government where we need to lobby government, but also support the investment that we know needs to be made. And we've got a very clear vision for what it is we want to build under Chris Boardman's steership. I don't think that vision changes. If anything, it amplifies and it accelerates, because we want to do that quicker. I think what is interesting is in the kind of hub and spoke conversation that we inevitably find ourselves in around towns versus city centre. Some of the conversations I've had in the last couple of weeks show really the opportunities for the towns, in that actually having more local based workplaces where people can more readily walk and cycle to work, as well as the bigger transport kind of connections from a cycling and walking facility perspective are really important. So I think it will change where perhaps we go to work, what facilities as employers certainly we need to encourage businesses to provide, so that it becomes easier for people to choose that as an option. And part of that is the working day, so you might not want to necessarily cycle in rush hour, but you might be, if you've got flexibility from your employers, then that helps. So I think it's about facilities, it's about investment, and also championing the benefits. So I think as we get more businesses that are supporting that, putting them on a bit of a pedestal and championing how it's made a difference to their business, the happiness of their employees, their productivity.
Thanks, Lou. Before I'm going to let you go, and then Mark, I'm going to come to you in a second about business and innovation. There's been a question about that, and Andy, I'll come to you second to talk about cycling if you've got anything to add. But before you go, I'm not going to let you go on this. There's a question coming about electric scooters, Lou, and I spent some time in Berlin before Christmas, and they're all over the place. And there's a question coming in: are we going to see electric scooters on the streets of Manchester? Now, that might be unfairly pointed at you, Lou, but if anyone wants to answer that, then please do answer it, because it's a question I think quite a lot of people will be asking.
Randomly, in my odd geeky world, I was reading an investment paper yesterday about the surge in investment that's now gone back into electric scooters, partly for the reasons we're outlining, and partly I think because cities, Paris, Berlin, cities are beginning to get their heads around how they operate, what the rules are, how they accommodate that, how they facilitate that, and that's both from some of the investments going into sharing facilities. We had a mixed experience, didn't we, with our shared bikes. So I don't think we want to emulate that. But so I think part of it is about how we accommodate it within city centres, but partly it's also, can we support that through sharing schemes that give access to scooters. So I think it's going to be, if we're going to be a modern green city, then it's going to have to be something we consider, and I was pleased yesterday to see the money starting to go back into some of those businesses that are fairly early stage actually within Europe, trying to work out what the model is.
Thanks. Yeah, of course, Andy.
Do you mind, John, if I do, just because there's quite just a little bit to add? I agree with everything Lou's just said, but I think this is really an opportunity to accelerate the electrification of all transport in Greater Manchester. So the scooters, we've been approached by the government to say, would we be a pilot area? Because I think there's a law change needed. And I've said to the Transport Secretary, we would, of course, always ready to try out the new in Greater Manchester. But it's more than that. We have actually, Lou, just signed off, I think you know this, but we've opened procurement on a bike hire scheme. We've accelerated that. So TFGM have just issued, I think, the notice for bids. So we're hoping to have that on the ground by spring next year, and that will include electric bikes. Recognising a few of our places that still have pretty steep hills to negotiate. But then beyond that, I'm wanting to accelerate reform in a number of areas. We've got a deal in place to put more electric vehicle charging points, particularly fast charging points around. I would like to see the electrification of the bus fleet. We've got some, but we want to go much, much further. So that is something that is very much coming. And the more the government works in partnership with us, the more we can kind of accelerate the reform of public transport, but also the electrification of public transport. It's my goal in the end to have essentially Metrolink standards on the whole thing. I want the whole thing to be electric, as Metrolink is. It runs on green energy. I don't know if people know that. It's zero emissions. Imagine a bus fleet that ran exactly to those standards as well, and electric bikes, scooters, you name it. It's an opportunity, and I'm determined to pursue it as such.
Thank you very much, Andy, and thank you to everybody. There are so many questions coming in. I think an hour wouldn't do this justice, would it? I mean, we have got about 20 minutes left. We'll try and get through as many as we can. I can assure you that the questions that we don't get to will be all captured into an FAQ, and it really does help form the growth of this narrative and this conversation. So thank you very much. Please stick with us, and we'll try and get through as many as we can. I just want to, before I go on to business, Mark, I just teased it there about business innovation, just to come back to you, Andy, and Lou, a little bit about carbon, the climate change, and then the zero carbon change. If anything to add to that, because obviously DM was very ahead in terms of pre-COVID times about green transport and climate change, and so if you've got anything to add to that at all.
Well, I think decarbonisation of transport, something I just talked about, but then let's think about property. So we've got our 2038 ambition to be a zero carbon city region. There is one big job creation opportunity staring us in the face, and it's the retrofitting of existing properties to make them zero carbon. There are potentially thousands of jobs in a scheme of that kind to be created across our 10 boroughs. And that's what I mean by conversion courses, moving people to green construction. Not necessarily just young people of any age. And I think now I've said to my own team, John, now's the moment to stop talking about those things and start doing actually. So that is a very clear example, as well as modern methods of construction. Passive house, for those who know it, is obviously a modular form of zero carbon housing. I think this is a moment to solve the housing crisis. I would like to go to the government to say, free us up to build 30,000 homes for social rent that are zero carbon homes for social rent, so that we can establish this new technology in Greater Manchester called passive house. And we can get our colleges teaching young people in the construction skills for passive, because it's very different to traditional cement and bricks and mortar. So these are the kind of opportunities that arise. We will try and get into them anyway, but if government comes in as a partner, if levelling up is really back on the agenda, then I think they can take a stride forward in this moment, rather than they were just kind of edging forward in the world pre-COVID. I think now you can see them sort of taking a leap forward, and that's what we're arguing for. We still haven't persuaded the government, but with business support, with people on this call sort of saying, yeah, we like that, let's all push for that, then perhaps we can achieve it.
Thanks, Andy, and that's a really important point you've made there. About it's down to us. I think Lou, you mentioned it right at the beginning. This is not top down. It's about everybody getting involved in this, and that's still the creation of jobs in the green economy, massively important. And again, build back better is the opportunity, isn't it? Mark, coming around to you now about business innovation. There's a question here which is about companies that tend to do well after recession are the ones that kept on investing time, resource, and in innovation during the recession. Will GM be maintaining, enhancing support for businesses to innovate products, services and processes? So a lot down to, I imagine, the growth company and what you're doing. Oh, I'll just unmute you. That's all right.
You always dive in and then forget to mute. So even after 3 months, I've not learned new habits yet. But yeah, I mean, it comes innovation. Where do you start and stop, really? Because it's everything. I mean, Andy and Lou have really stressed around the sectoral innovation themes that are coming through at the moment, whether it's the green economy, the digital economy, the advanced materials. You know, that's one swathe and route into innovation. I think there's probably a couple of others to talk about. One is, you know, the range of partners that may be involved in innovation. A lot of commentators calling out the role of social enterprises in the way that businesses could, or business activity could and should be done in the future. Have to declare vested interest there. We're the social enterprise, so I would absolutely call that out as a key component to driving the way forward. But I think the most important one, ultimately, at the end of the day, is colleagues or staff or workers, however you term them. In enabling your staff. I mean, the amount of innovation, even in our own business during this period, that's been driven by frontline staff just solving problems because they've had to, has been absolutely amazing. And I think, again, going back to Build Back Better and doing things differently, the way in which colleagues are empowered to do things will just let innovation run riot in an organization, and I think be absolutely great. In terms of the formal mechanisms that we might and do support innovation, yes, we have programs to help people to think creatively and, you know, run an innovation process within their business if they want to approach it like that. The CA and the LEP recently signed off additional funding for business angels to support those very early stage pre-revenue businesses in Greater Manchester. We've got a range of other loans and service offers in that field, whether it's just for innovation per se or in particular sectors. So again, I would just put a call out. If people have a challenge there, then contact my colleagues in the Growth Hub, and, you know, we'll talk and engage and support, but also draw in other partners in the region. You know, the universities are there, and other trade organisations are there to help with that innovation opportunity.
Thank you, Mark. And again, everybody who's on the call, I would urge you, if you haven't already, to engage in the Growth Hub website. There's so much opportunity to get involved if you're a business, to innovate, to grow. And that is one thing that hasn't changed through the last 14, 15 weeks. So please do urge you to do that. I'd like to talk about young people and talk to the panel about, and with the panel about young people. And Lou, I'm going to come to you first. There's a question come in about, you know, how can we ensure that young people's voices can be heard to influence and shape Build Back Better?
So I think, I mean, for me, the base answer to that question is about who we engage. So I think, you know, we as a LEP, as a kind of GM machine, can only be as good as the opinions and the insights, you know, that we get. And so I think one of the things that we're particularly keen on, and actually we're starting some activity next week, to reach out to, I suppose, the people who are the future employees and the future business owners and the future people who run businesses, to make sure that their voice is heard in that, and that we understand the world through their lens at the moment. You know, because frankly, for a lot of those people, 10 years of austerity and now the biggest economic crisis, certainly in our time, you know, that there's a lot to deal with. So I think it's very important that our engagement mechanism, which is why, you know, we believe the right way to shape thinking and policy is by dropping any perceived barriers and reaching out and allowing people to be part of that process. So yeah, I think it's about who we talk to and the voices that we listen to.
And engagement, brilliant. Andy, have you got anything to add about the young people?
I do quite a lot, actually. I started off by saying, you know, we can't let the 2020s be like the 1980s. And I think that's not just a sort of political statement. I think it's something that should unite us all, because none of us can afford a generation feeling that they've lost their way as part of this. we mustn't underestimate how disruptive this has been for a lot of young people, and how kind of crushing really for their kind of immediate hopes. You know, they may have had their sights on university or a job and it may have gone. Or so it's really, I think, you know, right question, whoever asked it, to sort of get the focus on young people. So just to explain what we're doing, I've got a round table with youth organisations next week to sketch out what our support package might look like. And we're building to a, hopefully, mass event later in the month, John, with young people everywhere, to try and say, well, what do you want? What can we do for you? What I'd like to do, working with Lou and the LEP, is basically create a young person's guarantee. So certainly for September, you know, making sure that every young person in Greater Manchester, and we could argue what's the definition of that, but, you know, under 21s have something to go to, so that they're not sort of kind of cast into a sort of, you know, sort of sense of being in a wasteland and don't know what's happening. I think we've got to kind of put a range of positive opportunities together. Businesses need to help us with this if possible, so that we give everyone a training opportunity, an apprenticeship opportunity, a job, a work experience opportunity, whatever it might be. So we've got a lot of thinking going on this, John. I will, even though it's difficult, I'm going to reconfirm soon that our free bus pass for 16 to 18s will be entering a second year, and we'll be opening for applications soon. So we're very focused on how critical this issue is, because, you know, supporting young people through this will be crucial to our businesses and to wider society. One last point on this. We've put ourselves in a good position by some of the plans we've laid pre-crisis, if you like. So we have a system that's just kind of come through earlier this year called GMAX, Greater Manchester Apprenticeships and Career Service. For those who don't know it, you know, I hope we could share the link to it so everyone on the call can see it. It's meant to be a single portal for all opportunities for young people with regard to career development or progression. And this system could come into its own now in this period that we're going into, to get the young person's guarantee kind of illustrated through GMAX, you know, so everyone can find their way through the GMAX system. So we're not fully there yet with everything lined up, John, but I hope you can get a sense that we're getting there, and we'll be able to make some very firm announcements later this month, hopefully, about what support we'll be providing for young people. And let's get back to it. One of the supports should be help to run your own business. I still think there are too many kids who grew up in Greater Manchester and the North more generally, who, like we were when we were growing up, expect to be employees and don't expect to be employers. There's a chance to change the culture here. I bet a lot of people have been sitting at home thinking, well, maybe I could set my own business up in whatever it might be, baking, or I don't know, making PPE, whatever. And I just think that culture needs to be, we always think in terms of training or employment, don't we? We need to get that entrepreneurial culture really to the fore as well. You know, why shouldn't you think about running your own business? And you know what? We're going to help you run your own business, and here's some free startup space to do it. That's going to be part of the offer too.
The Berlin of the North. Love it. Thank you, Andy. And I'm going to come to you, Mark, because again, obviously, the Growth Company is doing so much with initiatives with young people as well, and some which Andy may have touched on. So just again, update us what you're working on, and you know what may be coming down the line.
Up on Andy's point, we have already seen an uplift in inquiries about people wanting to launch their own business in this situation, and some absolutely brilliant ideas, you know, from retail to high value health innovation products, the whole spectrum and ages. So it would be great to be part of that pledge. I guess also we are quite a large apprentice provider, along with colleges and other organisations, and you know it's fair to say new apprenticeships have taken an absolute nosedive during this period, and therefore, you know, calling out the role of employers as offering one route forward. But again, as Andy says, you know, this could be about apprenticeships, it could be about colleges, it could be about starting your own business. There's a whole myriad of routes forward for young people going forward, and we would just like to play our part in that. But again, there are so many other organisations that I am absolutely certain will come behind that pledge to give every young person, again, as Andy says, however defined, an opportunity come, you know, the autumn period.
Thank you, Mark. And we're almost closing, but Andy, I've got a final question to you, and then I'm going to go back to the whole panel just to tie kind of a wrap-up statement about next steps and where you see it going next. But Andy, I've got a final question about Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities and about the race panel. And can you give any timescales or any clarity on the setting up of this race panel? The questions come in, Andy.
Yeah, thanks, John. I think I saw Sharon's question. Thank you, Sharon, for the question. So colleagues may know that we were in discussion about, we were going to originally call it a faith and race equality panel, but we decided that was the wrong way to do it, and we've now taken a decision, or I've taken a decision, to create a race equality panel separate to a faith panel, which some crossovers but separate. And we took a decision yesterday that we would, though we've kind of almost had it on hold a little bit through the crisis, we're going to bring it forward next month. So I can answer Sharon's question, say the proposals will be brought forward next month. And we think this will complement an approach which is all voices in Greater Manchester devolution. We have a disabled people's panel, we have an LGBT panel, a young youth combined authority. Separate, alongside the race equality panel, there's going to be a women's equality panel as well. So the two proposals are going to come forward together next month. So Councillor Brenda Warrington is working on those, who's the equalities lead for Greater Manchester, and that will be coming forward. And obviously there'll be details about how people can apply to be a member, etc. So it was in our thinking anyway, John. But we're challenging ourselves to go faster and do more. And I say to everybody on the call, we all should challenge ourselves, particularly about the underrepresentation of the Black community in public life in Greater Manchester. It is noticeable, and it can't carry on. We need all of us to do more to make sure that there's fair representation of everybody in decision making in our city region. That's how we build a stronger city region going forward.
Thanks, Andy. And this does give us an opportunity, doesn't it, to really focus on that. So thank you very much. And just, Andy, you mentioned GMAPS before. The web will be a web link to GMAPS at the end of the, fairly soon now, at the end of the webinar. So thank you for that. Lou, I'm going to come to you to give me your final thoughts. And I think one of the things, if some of the audience might be asking, is what next? Where do we go from here, and how can we turn these great commitments into action?
Thanks, John. So the what next, partly from a LEP perspective, we're looking at what the opportunities are, how we build back better into the recovery strategy, which is a very live and pacey piece of work, shall I say. But I think, the what next from everyone who's here today is I would keep encouraging people to get in touch, to challenge us. I think it's good for us to be kicked a bit and challenged a bit, and to remind us of the things that we're not thinking about, the opportunities we might be missing. Where people want to get involved, let us know. We've got people who are now looking at all of those people who've got in touch and beginning to assign projects and people that they're best matched to, but keep sharing your opinions, and we will be back out to everybody who gets in touch, not just in the next few weeks but in the next few months, to get you involved in some of that thinking that we're going to be formulating as we get into the detail of the execution of what it is we've actually got to do. The key thing for Build Back Better, as Andy's talked about, is it's not a pipe dream, it's not a slogan, it's about actually giving some tangible reality to this now over the next few months. And we just can't overstate the urgency of that, really, given what's coming. So and a thanks to everybody who's already got involved, because it's really heartening, and it's Manchester at its best, isn't it?
Yeah, thank you, Lou. Mark, any final comments from you, Mark? Anything you want to add or wrap up, or observations?
Really just to re-emphasize some of the points earlier around we absolutely recognize that owners and managers of businesses have huge demands on their time and capacity at this moment in time, but the way through that is to cut through, innovate, rise up to the opportunities that we're talking through, because if you look backward you'll die basically, and you need to go with what's been explained today. And I know it's hard. We're having to do it as a business, you're having to do it as a business, Lou's having to do it as a business as well, but it's the only way forward.
Thank you. And finally, Andy, final thoughts from yourself.
Thanks, John. Firstly, to echo Lou, John, it is amazing actually just seeing the number of comments coming through. Fantastic, brilliant suggestions. When Lou and I first set out on this Build Back Better, I think we wondered what where it would go, what the appetite would be. It's amazing actually. It's funny how the phrase has become sort of everyone starting to latch onto it because it's what we need, isn't it? It's what we need to galvanise everybody. So thanks everyone for being involved. I think just picking up on some of what we've heard today, particularly in the chat, I think there's a clarity that people don't want to build back the same, do they? Some of the talk of social enterprises and co-ops, and there are different ways of thinking about how we do things. And I think I'll certainly be talking to Mark and the Growth Company about how we get better at not just supporting people who want to become self-employed, but how we support the development of new co-ops or, crucially, new social enterprises. Let's see a kind of flourishing of different forms of enterprise in this period, because maybe they might speak even more to the mood of the times that we're in. I think the thing that I would say is the more we build this together, the stronger it will be. I mean, I've got to have to go to government soon for everybody. I'm opening up those conversations now. They know we're going to bid for pilot status on a reformed health and care unified system. They know we're going to be asking for help with the youth guarantee. They know we want to accelerate green construction, digital, and have freedom to start building more homes for social. There's a lot of things that they know we're going to bid for. The more that business gets right behind us and we do this as one, the better and stronger it will be. So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of great to come on a session like this, just because it kind of reinvigorates you a little bit. And I bet Lou and Mark feel the same. And I think the thing is, no one's saying here that we're going to drop these policies on you from a great height and that's it. There's an evolutionary approach here, and all the panels we're setting up, and that's about kind of opening up those policies to those groups as well. So we get a very, very inclusive approach to policy development through this. There's a long, hard journey ahead of us all, but I just think it could be a moment for Greater Manchester. I mentioned levelling up, John, becoming kind of accelerated. We are going to have a challenge filling some of our office space going forward. We've got to kind of work harder at making people feel confident to come back to the city. But there's an opportunity there, isn't there, to bring organisations to Greater Manchester who've perhaps not thought of coming here before because of the level of activity we've got going on in the future-facing industries, green, digital, and all the rest of it. So it's a bit self-fulfilling. The one thing I would say this to everybody on the call who is an office-based organisation in the city centre, I'm hearing a bit in the ether that everyone's saying, well, we're not planning on coming back to the office anytime soon at all. In fact, not this year, and we're not sure about next. What I would say is, I think, if you don't mind me saying, you've all, as I have, got an responsibility to support the city and the city centre and the vibrancy of the city. So I think we do want to, I'm asking everybody not to bring everyone back at once, but I am asking you to bring some people back, because there are city centre businesses, bars, restaurants, retail that depend upon the footfall, and the city needs that vibrancy back within it. So, it's about striking the balance, isn't it? Doing it safely, but we are asking you to work with us to bring people back. I'm soon going to issue a template for the way in which Churchgate House will start to bring people back. And I hope that might be something that everybody can use then to follow, to say, well, this is how we slowly, safely bring people back to the city. But let's bring people back, because it's about this place being a vibrant, attractive place to live. So I'll probably, I've said enough, probably, John, for today. I don't know if I noticed it last time. I noticed the Alan Smith shirt behind you in the first seminar, but is that the Leeds manager as well on your cabinet there?
Yeah, listen. Those astute people on the webinar. I'm in Timperley. I have to say I'm in Timperley.
That's no excuse, I don't think.
And there's a long story behind Alan Smith,
there's other plans as part of Build Back Better. One being cancel the current Premier League season, because obviously, I know as an Everton supporter, I'm in full tune with all of the my residents in Greater Manchester. But obviously that would mean cancelling promotion from the.
There's that's at 4 o'clock.
I haven't told you about the plan under Build Back Better to annex West Yorkshire, because that's the that's phase 2. But we maybe won't get into that one today. But
I'm a doctor. I've been here 20 years, but it's and I can't wait to get back to city centre. There's only so much business you can do from Tinsley. God bless Tinsley. I want to get back to city centre and get back to Northern Quarter. Thanks, Andy. Look, sadly, we're coming to the end of today's webinar, and I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. I think we all agree there's a lot been going on. There's a lot to talk about, and we could engage for hours about Build Back Better. So let's not stop. Let's keep up the momentum and the conversation going. One of the key messages from today, I think, is this is just the beginning of the journey, and for real and lasting change to happen, it can only happen when we work together. And on the GM theme, I think partnering and collaboration is something which Greater Manchester does in bucket loads. I'd certainly recommend keeping in contact and checking the Growth Company website and Greater Manchester Local Enterprise website and their social feeds for up-to-date information. And as ever, I'd like to thank our speakers, Andy Burnham, Lou Cordwell and Mark Hughes. And again, I want to take the liberty of saying a huge thank you to you on behalf of the business community for your contributions today and for all that you're doing. This is a massive opportunity. It's a massive opportunity for us all, and we're going to help you deliver it, and we're all going to deliver it. And finally, to the Growth Company and Greater Manchester's Local Enterprise Partnership for enabling this webinar to happen. Thank you and goodbye.